Greetings, metalheads. Welcome to another edition of the Friday 13th YouTube channel. I hope you're well. Today, you're going to be listening to a live concert review, which is also going to feature some live photos. This is from the Headbangers Open Air Festival in Germany, which took place on the 24th of July of 2024 and finished on the 27th of the July of 2024. So this was a fantastic festival. If you've been there yourself, you'll know exactly what to expect. And if you haven't been before, please check it out. This is the best garden party that you're ever going to go to in metal. It's a couple of days before Wacken, so if you get the opportunity to check out this festival before heading to Wacken, please do. Now, folks, this is my fourth time I've been to this fantastic festival. I want to thank Jürgen and also Thomas, the organisers, for letting me take photos and also talk to some great bands. But it's a great festival, folks. It's very intimate. Some great people there. It's very, very small festival. It's a festival built on a farm with a small stage, but the camping area is actually bigger than the festival. There's some great bands there, and it's all based around 80s and 90s metal. There's no modern bands here. It's all old school, classic, fantastic festival. So, without further ado, I'm going to talk about the Wednesday, which is the 24th of July of this year. It was a warm-up show which featured 4 bands. Now, the warm-up show would feature 4 acts. The opening act was a band from Sweden. They were called Vanquisher, followed by a band called Hell Noise, Rezet from Germany, most of you out there may know them, thrash metal band, and the headlining band was a power metal band, technical power metal called Manticora from Denmark. Now, opening act, Vanquisher from Sweden, are a fantastic power metal band. I guess you could say the Barbarians, the way they're dressed, as you'll see in this review, playing a mixture of classic heavy metal with power metal. Now, I've never heard this band before, and I was very, very shocked and surprised how good they were live. Now, looking at the band's image, they come across between Manowar and also a band called Turisas. They've got the barbaric look of both bands, but the music is very, very different. It's very, very powerful indeed. Now, these guys have released 3 releases. The debut was released in 2019. It was called Shadows Over Starga, followed by the next album, which was released in 2022. This was called Storm Invaders. And the new album is called An Age Undreamed Of, which is an absolute great album, folks. If you've not heard it, please check it out. Having listened to the new album, I'd have to say there's a cross between Hammerfall, Dream Evil, and a little bit of Jagdpanzer in there. So if you like the Swedish power metal with a little bit American old school, this is a band that you really need to check out, folks. Now, I'm also going to have to say there's a little hint of Gravedigger in their music as well, and maybe a little bit of Running Wild. So you get the vibe of what this band sound like. So this band are a 5-piece band. This would feature vocalist Nyhard of n.w.o.b.h.m on vocals, Horsa the Untamed on guitars, Hamdel the Warlord on guitars, Gorm of the Pounding Hooves on drums, and on bass guitar we'd have Wolf here the Executioner. Now, I have to say, folks, I was extremely impressed with vocalist Nyhard. Was a fantastic vocalist. This guy can really sing the high notes. And vocally, he comes across between Harry the Tyrant from Jagdpanzer. These guys were a fantastic opening act for the warm-up show. Very powerful, lots of melody with some high screaming vocals, all around a fantastic band. So I'm going to tell you now what the songs were that the band played live. Now, the band's opening track was called Yamaris Wrath, Priest of Set, Ode to the Slain, Wisp of Goshmare, Giants, Trapped on Ashman's Plain, and the last song would be called Battleborn. Now, these guys were fantastic. As I said, the crowd really enjoyed them. I really enjoyed them. They're a band to check out, Inkusha from Sweden. So please check these guys out, folks. A really good band. I'm looking forward to hearing more about this band in the very near future. So now we're going to talk about the next band. This is a band called Helloys. Now, these guys are from Holland and were formed back in 1984. Now, these guys are also in a band called Highway Chile. Some of you guys may know them. We're going to talk about that band later on because they actually played the festival as well. Now, in 1983, the band released their first demo. This was followed by the band's debut album called Cosmology. This was released in 1985. And with the success of the debut album, it wasn't long before the band released their next album back in 1986. This was entitled Poetry. Now, the band went quiet for a long time, then came back 10 years or so later on and released the next album. This was called A Time and Place for Everything. This was released back in 1998. 2001, the band released the band's next album. This was called Fata Morgana. Now, the band remind me of an old Dutch band also called Picture. Now, you guys out there probably know them. Diamond Dream, a fantastic album. Now, another band that springs to mind when listening to this band, Hellboys, is a band called Savage from the UK. These guys are a really good hard rock metal band. And the band being a five-piece, I'm going to tell you the lineup is, we'd have Stan Verbeek on vocals, Ernst van E on drums, and also we'd have on guitars, Ben Ballot. And all three members are also, like I said before, in the band Highway Chili. Now, there's one good thing I like about this festival, Headbangers Open Air. There's a lot of bands that I've never even heard of. Now, I've got to say, Stan is a fantastic vocalist. He's very, very powerful. Now, there's one album I'm listening to right now about this band. It's an album called A Time and Place for Everything. I also have to say they're one of the best bands of the festival. I was really impressed with what they played. And like I say, Highway Chili are also a great band. Also in the band, there's a guitarist called Arjen Bogaerts, and on bass guitar, we have Marcel Remius. Musically, these guys are absolutely fantastic musicians. They've been around for like a long time, so I highly recommend Helios. So now I'm going to tell you what the tracks were that the band played live. We'd open up with HC's Coming to Get Ya, followed by the song After the War. We'd also have Jesse James, Rat Race, The Enemy Within, For a Moment, Gates of Heaven, Rock and Roll Fantasy, Hard Life, Wasted Years, and the last song would be called Dreaming of Heaven. So Helios are a fantastic band, great musicians. Check them out, folks. Now, next up was a German thrash band. Now, these guys are called Rezet. Most of you out there may know them. They've been around for some time now. I first discovered this band when they were supporting Anvil in the UK a few years ago. So these guys are really good musicians. I'm going to tell you when the band were formed, if you didn't know. I'm going to tell you the lineup as well. Now, the band were formed back in 2004. Now, the band were formed by original guitarist and vocalist. This would be Ricky Wagner. And the band's debut album was released in 2010. This was called Have Gun, Will Travel. This album would also feature members Sasha Mirth on bass guitar, Bastian Santen on drums, and Thorben Schultz on guitars. Now, the debut album was a real success for the band. It wasn't long before the band released the next album. This is called Civil Nightmares. This was released in 2012. In 2016, the band released the next album. This is called Reality is a Lie. Now, this would feature new bassist Lucas Grimmett. Now, the band released another album in 2019. This was called Deal With It, followed by Truth in Between in 2021. And the band have just released their new album, so check it out, folks. It's called Rezet, and it's released in 2024. Now, the band's music to me comes across between three bands: Destruction, Overkill, and Old School Megadeth. With Ricky's vocals reminding me of Schmier from Destruction and Dave Mustaine from Megadeth. A great combination. He's a fantastic singer. He's got a very powerful voice. Now, these guys are absolutely fantastic live. If you've not seen them before, please check them out. They're very, very powerful live and play some old school German thrash. So these guys played a pretty long set. So now I'm going to tell you what the songs were that the band played at Headbangers Open Air. We'd have Reality is a Lie, The Devil's Bride, Truth in Between, Majority Razor, Toxic Avenger, Unholy Grail, Duck and Cover, Dead End, Walking, and Nicola would do a solo, then it would be followed by Alone, Popular, Delete, Repeat, Have Gun, Will Travel, and the last song would be called Dead City. So that's the set list for Rezet. If you've not seen it before, check them out, and please check out the band's new album, which has recently just come out. Now, the next band would be the headliners for the warm-up show. Most of you guys out there probably know this band, and if you don't, well, you're missing a fantastic band. This is Manticora. Now, Manticora were formed back in 1997. Now, this band was formed by Lars F. Larsson. Now, Lars is the only original member of the band. He's a great singer and has really kept this band together throughout their career. Also in the band would have Christian Larsen, Mads Hoff on drums, and also bassist René. In 1998, the band would sign to Instrumental Management, and the band released their debut album, which was called Roots of Eternity. Now, this album would also feature Flemming Schultz on guitars, and on keyboards would have Jippy E.G. Jensen. Now, the band have always been compared to a Scandinavian version of Iced Earth. And if you listen to the band's music, you can see why. Some very fast speed riffing here. I mean, sometimes the very first album, Roots of Eternity, could also have hints of Dragon Force. In the early stages, Lars's vocals would remind me of Matt Barlow from Iced Earth. Not only did the band's early career have the Iced Earth, they'd also have the hints of Metallica from the era of Rather Leighton or Master of Puppets. Now, the band have released some fantastic albums. They've released some great ones, such as Darkness with Tales to Tell. This was released in 2001. We'd have The Black Circus Part 1 and Part 2. They came later on. And the band have released a new album. This came out this year, and it's called Lyceum, and it's a fantastic album. This was released on Mighty Music. So if you've not heard the new album, check it out. And while you're at it, please check out the interview I did recently with the band. So the current lineup the band had at Headbangers Open Air would be Kirsten Larson on guitars. We'd have Lars Larson on vocals. We'd have Stefan Johansson on guitars. And on bass guitar, we'd have Casper Graham. Now, live, the band hired a session drummer. I actually think he's in the band now, but he was a fantastic drummer, very technical. Sadly, I didn't get his name, so I do apologise, folks. Now, when I listen to the band's new album, Lyceum, it's a very, very heavy album, very technical in places. At times, some of the music reminds me of Scar Cemetery. Throughout the band's career, the band have got heavier and more complex, but there is the old school Iced Earth in there, and Lars's vocals, like I said, do remind me of Matt Barlow. Now, another band that also springs to mind in this band's music is a Canadian band called Into Eternity. This is Stu Block's old band, who's also with Iced Earth. Live, these guys are very intense. They're playing some fantastic music. It's very, very powerful. The crowd absolutely loved them. There's lots of headbang going on, but it was a really good end of the warm-up show to have Manticora closing the set. So now I'm going to tell you what the set list was for Manticora that evening. We'd have Winter Solstice, Necropolitans, Goblin Sirens, Beast of the Fall, Disciple of the Entities, Marcelium, Slaughter in the Desert Room, Echoes of a Silent Scream, and the last song will be called A Long Farewell. Manticora guys are a fantastic band. Go and check them out if you haven't, and please check out their new album. So that's the warm-up review. So folks, now we come to the first official day for the Headbangers Open Air. This was the Thursday, the 25th of July. Now, there were some great bands that played this festival, and the first band to hit the stage was a doom metal band from Hamburg, Germany, called Blood, Sweat and Tears. Now, these guys were formed back in 1994. Now, these guys are a four-piece, so I'm going to tell you who's in the band. We'd have the bassist Lutz Remer on bass guitar. We'd have Jan Galinsky on drums. We'd also have Jan Bud Bach on guitars, and also on guitars and vocals we'll have Hengo Hikowenek. So that is the lineup for Blood, Sweat and Tears. Now, Blood, Sweat and Tears actually sing in German, and their music kind of comes across between Crowbar, Candlemas, Down, Saint Vitus, and also the band I Hate God. Now, the vocals very much remind me of Crowbar. So if you are a fan of Crowbar, then you're really going to enjoy this band. Although they do sing in German, the music really does stand out. Now, the band released their first EP. This was released in 2000. This was called Via Plus 2, followed by Hamburg City Doom, released in 2009. The band released their first album, which was called Die Illusions. This was released in 2013, followed by Utter Deck in 2017. And the band's new album will be called Burst, which was released in 2022. So now I'm going to tell you what the song titles were that the band played live at Headbangers Open Air. So guys, I'm going to do my best to say these titles in German for you. We'd have the opening track, which was called Die Illusion, Ne, Ian, Tag, Am, Leben. We'd also have the song Ride On, so there's two English titles here, which is a Christy Moore cover. We'd also have the song Die Hoffnung. So guys, I tried my best to say some of the titles in German for you. So that was the set list for the opening act, Blood, Sweat and Tears. Really good doom band. If you're a fan of doom metal, check those guys out. They're very interested and very good musicians. Next to hit the stage would be a band called Claymorian. Now, these guys have been around for some time now. Originally formed back in 1994. Originally from Siberia and now living in Belgrade. Now, the band are playing a mixture of epic power metal, the early years, would also have a mixture of heavy power and doom metal elements. The band are currently signed to Storm Spell Records. So this is a five-piece female-fronted band which consists of the following members. On vocals, we'd have Dijana, Garcevic, and also we'd have on guitars, we'd have Valdemir Savelic, Goran Severic on bass guitars, Euros Severic on guitars, and on drums, we'd have Marco Severic. So as you can see, there's pretty much, it seems to be brothers and sisters in this band. So these guys have done quite a few albums. The first album would be released in 2003. This was called The First Dawn of Sorrow, followed by Element of Victory in 2013. The next album would be called Unspoken, released in 2015, followed by Sounds from the Dying World in 2017, Eulogy of the Gods in 2021. That was the band's last release. Now, the crowd were really ready for this band. They obviously made a big impact in Europe. And with the success of the band's current album, Eulogy of the Gods, the crowd were ready for this band. The band really did take to the stage and performed extremely well. Having listened to songs from the current album, they kind of have a little vibe there of Saxon, with old school elements of Jag Panzer, Omen, and a band called Coda Unborn. For some reason, vocalists remind me a little bit of Leather Leone was once with Dave Chastain. Now, I'm not saying her vocals are as strong as Leather, but she's got that kind of range and that kind of tone to her voice, as well as Celtic influences. I guess you could say they're a cross between, in places, of Skyclad meets Gravedigger. So the set list for Claymorian would be Acheron, Knights and Swords, Spirit of the Merciless Time, Battle in the Sky, Blood Red Shield, The Triumph, Semimara, Hunter of the Damned, We Fight Like Lions, and the last song would be a Milana Road cover. It would be called Flaming Metal Systems. I guess that was dedicated to Mark. So Mark, rest in peace. These guys were great live. So if you've not heard the band before, please check them out. So now we'll come to the next act. This is a band called Highway Chili. These guys are from Holland. And as I said to you before, they played the night before under the name of Helios. And with the same lineup, we have Hernis Van He on drums. We'd have Martin Menz on guitars. We'd have Gert n.w.o.b.h.m on guitars. We'd have Stan Verbach on vocals. And on bass, we'd have Marcel Remius. Now, these guys were formed in Rotterdam back in 1980. It wasn't until 1983 when the band released their first album after a couple of demos. This was called Storybook Heroes. Followed by the band's next album in 1985. This was called Rockorama. After that, there was a little 6-year gap before the band released their next album. This was called High Noon, released in 1991. And the band's last album is called Keeper of the Earth, released in 2008. Now, the music for Highway Chili is slightly different from that from Helios. Not so much directed towards bands like Picture. Having said that, Highway Chili do play new wave of British heavy metal, or you could say new wave of Dutch metal. I guess you could say that Highway Chili's music does compare to a little bit of the early Grim Reaper material. Now, another band that springs to mind when I listen to Highway Chili is a little hint of Persian Risk from Wales. Now, the fans at Headbangers Open Air were really getting into this band. You could see that the band were happy and enjoying it just as much as the fans were. Playing pure 80s metal. This is something that we all love to hear. So the set list would be the intro, followed by Highway Chili is Coming to Get Ya, Jesse James, Carol, Going Blind, Hard Life, Nothing to Do About It, Endless Trail, Fever, Biting Anger, and the last song would be called Headbangers. So guys, that's the set list for Highway Chili. Please check them out. They're a fantastic band. Like I said, just like Helios, two great bands. Now, next to hit the stage was a UK band that are making a real name for themselves. This is Tailgunner. Now, these guys play old school new wave of British heavy metal. They're all young kids in their 20s, but they really are talented musicians. Recently, they've been supporting KK's Priest and also touring with Armoured Saint. Now, these guys were formed in 2018. Now, these guys have released a few singles, an EP, and one album. The first single will be released in 2022. This was called Guns for Hire, followed by Revolution Scream, also in 2022, Shadows of War in 2022, and an EP called Crash Dive in 2022. This will be followed by another single, then the current debut album, which is called Guns for Hire. This was released in 2023. Now, this album would feature the following members. We'd have Thomas Hewson on bass guitar. We'd have Sam Cadwell on drums. we'd have Zach Savini on guitars. We'd also have Craig Carnes on vocals. And on guitars, we'd have Patrick van der Vollering. And since the album has been recorded, they've had a new replacement on guitar and drums. We'd have Janai Passanen, who's also played live for Riot 5. And on guitars, we'd have Rhea Thompson, who's an absolute fantastic guitarist. Vocalist Craig is a fantastic frontman with a very powerful range. Guitarist Zach is a fantastic guitarist. He really does shred. Kind of reminds me a little bit of Marty Friedman at times. Now, these guys are very much influenced by Iron Maiden, especially in the early days of either Killer's album or maybe Number of the Beast, the first album that featured Bruce Dickinson. If I listen to the album, such songs as Future's Lost, it kind of reminds me of The Trooper by Iron Maiden. Now, another band that springs to mind when listening to these guys is a band called Tokyo Blade. On the other hand, we also have American bands such as Savage Grace. The band's debut album, Guns for Hire, is a very successful debut. It's getting some fantastic reviews, and the band are getting some really good interviews. Now, these guys hit the stage. The crowd are extremely ready for these guys. These guys have lots of power of energy live. Both guitarists Rhea and Zach are fantastic musicians. Now, halfway through the set, these two musicians trade off from one another doing a guitar solo assault. Now, the crowd are really into them. There's a lot of headbanging in the crowd, a little bit of a mosh pit, but everybody really thoroughly enjoyed this band. So we'd open up with Zoba the Greek. So this was like the Greek intro. This would be followed by the song Guns for Hire, White Death, Beast in the Night, Warhead, Guitar Battle. That was the two guitarists doing the trade-off. We'd have In the Hall of the Mountain King. We'd also have Revolution Scream, Crash Dive, and the last song would be Don't Talk to Strangers, the classic cover by Dio. Now, next up was a band from Ireland, old school thrashers Gama Bomb. Now, these guys have been around for some years now. They've had some great support acts such as Overkill. Now, Gama Bomb were formed in 2002. Now, this band was formed by friends Joe McGillan and Philly Brain, along with guitarist Luke Graham. Now, Phil is the lead vocalist, as we all know. Bass guitarist is Joe. Would also have on guitar in the early stages would be Luke Graham, Kevy, Canavan on lead guitars. Would also have on drums Damien Boyce. And on drums would have Rowan Fitzpatrick on drums. Now, in 2005, the band would release their debut album. This was called Survival of the Fastest. This was released on a label called Witch's Brew. With the success of this album, this was soon brought to the attention of label Earache Records, who would soon signed the band up to release the band's second album, Citizen's Brain, released in 2008. In total, these band have released 8 albums, and the last album was released in 2023. This was called Bats. And with the current lineup being Joey on bass guitar, we'd also have Philly on vocals, we'd have Dominic Dixon on lead guitar, and on rhythm guitar, we'd have John Roach, with drummer James Stewart. Now, these guys took to the stage. This band had so much energy. They were absolutely fantastic to watch. The crowd were really into them. There's a lot of thrashing going on, a lot of headbanging. Philly, to me, is very much the UK or the Irish version of Bobby Blitz from Overkill. Another fantastic singer, one of my favourite bands, Overkill. But Philly is a great singer and a great frontman. Musically, you've got the old school thrash giants, such as Overkill, Forbidden, and Exodus. They seem to be pretty much the band's influences, but there's also other influences in there as well. Now, Philly is a fantastic frontman, and he really does know how to get the crowd going. The band, like I said, are full of energy, full of charisma, and a very extreme metal band live to watch. Now, I really enjoyed watching this band live. It's great to catch up with them live and also to have a chat with them backstage. These guys are great live to watch. So now I'm going to tell you the actual song titles that they played live for this year's Headbangers Open Air. So the set list that the band were playing live at the Headbangers Open Air would be Miami Super Cops, Egyptiathron, 6616, Living Dead in Beverly Hills, Avenge Me, Bring Out the Monster, Thrashaholic, Slam Anthem, Mussolini, Mosh, Rusted Gold, Speed Funeral, Terrascope, Funglong's Cover, Zombie Blood Nightmare. So that's the titles for the set list for this year's Headbangers Open Air for Gama Bomb. So next to hit the stage after Gama Bomb was a band from Belgium. These guys are called Evil Invaders. Now, they've been around since 2007, playing old school thrash and speed metal. Now, these guys released their debut album in 2015 for Napalm Records. This was called Pulse of Pleasure. Now, the lineup for this album would have Joe on vocal and guitars. We'd also have Sam Lemonens on guitars. We'd have Sanny Jacobs on drums. And on the bass guitar, we'd have Nico Beekwilder. With the success of the band's debut album, it wasn't long before the band released their next album in 2017. This was called Feed Me Violence. And the band would release their last album in 2022, also for Napalm Records. This was called Shattering Reflections, a great follow-up to the band's previous two albums. And so the current lineup right now would have Joe on vocals and guitars, would have Senny Jacobs on drums, would have Max on guitars, and on bass guitar, well, Jerry. Now, folks, I've been listening to the band's previous albums and the current one. I really enjoy what they're playing. The band's music comes across between Exciter, Iron Angel, and on the other side, the thrash metal bands would have Exodus. The vocals kind of remind me of Paul Bailoff, formerly with Exodus. Other bands that spring to mind when I listen to Evil Invaders music is a band called Paradox from Germany. Most of you guys out there probably know them. Also, Mandata. Live, they were absolutely fantastic, and the fans loved them. After Gama Bomb's performance, these guys played a fantastic set. The fans loved them. Again, mosh pits, headbanging. Everybody really enjoyed watching this band live. So the band would be playing the following songs live. We'd have Feed Me Violence, Mental Penitentiary, Hissing in, Crescendo in Deep Black, which is an absolute fantastic song. I really like that song. It kind of reminds me a little bit of Metal Church in places. Also, Sledgehammer Justice, Broken Dreams in Isolation, Die For Me, as Life Slowly Fades, Pulse of Pleasure, and the last song would be called Raising Hell. So, Evil Invaders, another fantastic band on the bill, playing old school thrash and speed metal. So, folks, next up would be the headliners, Germany's one and only Sodom. Like Creator, Destruction, and Tankard, America has the big four, Germany has the big four, and Sodom are definitely one of them. These guys have been around for many, many years, definitely influenced by Motorhead and Venom, as well as bands such as Raven and Tank. You can certainly hear all these bands in their band's music. As we all know, Sodom was originally formed by vocalist and bassist Tom Angel Ripper back in 1981. The band had released some really, really brutal heavy demos, and it wasn't long before Steam Hammer Records would sign the band up, and they would be releasing their first release, which would be called Obsessed by Cruelty, and this was released in 1986, which was a great debut album, a great follow-up to the band's EP. Now, this album would feature Destructor on guitars and Chris Witch Hunter on drums. Now, we all know Chris passed away many, many years ago. It was a great drummer, great influence to the band, and a great asset. In 1987, the band released their second album. This was called Persecution Mania, which would feature Frank Blackfire on guitars, who's currently back in the band right now. With the success of Persecution Mania, it wasn't long before the band would release one of my favourite albums, which would come next. This was called Agent Orange, released back in 1989. In total, the band have released 15 albums, and the band we're currently supporting for the new album, which was called Genesis X1X, which was released in 2020. This would have a new lineup. As we all know, Tom has gone through quite a lot of lineup changes with guitarists and drummers, but on this album would have Frank Blackfire on lead guitars, who's back in the band, like I said, Yorak, C gets on rhythm guitar, and on drums would have Tony Markle on drums. So that's the lineup for the current band. Now, these guys have not changed the style whatsoever. Just like Venom and Motorhead, they've stayed true to their rights and continue writing strong, solid albums. I guess you could say Tom is the German answer to Lemmy from Motorhead, or maybe Kronos from Venom. Now, I have to say it was great to see this band live. It's been some time for me. They played an absolute fantastic set, very heavy and extreme, with some really dirty guitar sounds. I tried my best to get some decent photos for this set, but there was a lot of blue. As you'll see, the band performed extremely well, playing old school German thrash metal. Now the fans were really heated up and had plenty of energy. They were definitely ready to see Sodom live. This mosh pit was insane. The band performed brilliantly. The crowd were really into it. I really enjoyed what the band played. and they pretty much ripped the stage apart. They were fantastic from the beginning to the end of the set. So now I'm going to tell you what the songs were that the band played live at Headbangers Open Air. So the band would play 17 songs. So we'd open up with Procession 2, Golgotha, followed by Christ Passion, Jabba the Hutt, The Crippler, Sodomized, The Saw is the Law. We'd also have Blasphemer, followed by Napalm in the Morning, Nuclear Winter, Proselytum Rail, Let's Fight in the Darkness of Hell, Agent Orange, a fantastic song as we all know. We'd also have a cover of Venom, Leave Me in Hell, followed by Sodomy and Lust, Get What You Deserve, Atom Bomb, followed by the last song, Bomb and Hengel. Bomb and Hengel. So that was a set list for Sodom, a great closing act for the first day at the Headbangers Open Air. So, folks, there you go. I'll give you a rundown for the first 2 days. There's going to be a link to follow for part 2, so you can check out the bands and the pictures for the next 2 days. Thanks for listening and watching, folks. Enjoy the photos. Please leave some comments and let me know what you think of the photography, as well as the review. Thanks, folks.